The typewriter was still humming when Ketta Zimmerman's hands started shaking. The American clerk, a girl who couldn't be older than 20, wearing lipstick the color of fresh cherries, touched a single key. The letter appeared on the page with mechanical violence, crisp and perfect. The carriage return automatic. She did it again. Touch, strike, letter, no pressure needed, no cramping, no fighting the machine like it was an enemy that needed subduing. Ketta's fingers had calluses on top of calluses. 3 years of hammering a 1920s Corona manual typewriter, producing medical reports in a Hamburg hospital that ran out of morphine in 1943. She'd typed supply requisitions for bandages that never came, patient lists for beds that didn't exist. Her right index finger had a permanent dent from the force required to make the keys strike hard enough to be legible through carbon paper. The American clerk smiled and gestured to the chair. "Go ahead, honey, give it a try." Ketta sat. The chair had padding. Actual padding, not a wooden seat worn smooth by a decade of use. She positioned her hands over the keys the way she'd been trained. Fingers arched, wrists elevated, ready to strike with force. She pressed the T key. It flew onto the page. Effortless. Perfect. The machine did all the work. She pressed H, then E. The tears came before she could stop them. Hot and sudden and completely uncontrollable. Her shoulders began to shake. The other American women in the administrative office exchanged confused glances. One started to approach, but the clerk held up a hand, stopping her. Ketta couldn't breathe properly. This machine, this casual, standard-issue American office machine that they used to type cafeteria menus, represented more industrial sophistication than anything in the entire hospital where she'd worked for 3 years of war. The Americans had built thousands of these, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, while Germany was still using equipment from before the Great War, while her fingers bled and cramped, while they typed out death certificates on machines that jammed every fourth word. "I'm sorry," she managed in broken English, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "I am sorry. It's okay," the clerk said gently. She pulled up another chair. "Take your time. We got all day." But that was the problem, wasn't it? They had all day. They had time. They had machines that worked. They had padding on chairs and fresh ribbons in typewriters and electric power that never cut out. They had won the war before it even started, and Ketta had just been too deep in the rubble to see it. The other women in the office had gone back to their work. The sound of a dozen electric typewriters filled the room, a mechanical symphony of abundance. Ketta sat very still and listened to America working. Have you ever had a moment where something simple, a machine, a tool, just an everyday object, completely changed how you understood the world? 2 weeks later, Frida Brandt held the nylon stockings like they might disintegrate if she breathed too hard. She was 19 years old. She'd operated radio equipment for the Luftwaffe in Cologne. She'd survived 3 bombing raids. She'd watched her city burn. And she had never, not once in her entire life, owned anything this fine. The American Red Cross woman had handed them over casually, pulling them from a cardboard box like they were nothing special. "1 pair per person," she'd said in clumsy German, "courtesy of the Ladies' Auxiliary in Shreveport." Frida's mother had owned 1 pair of stockings. 1. She'd darned them 12 times, the repairs stacked on top of each other like scar tissue, until they were more mending than original fabric. When they finally disintegrated beyond salvation in 1944, her mother had cried. These were perfect, seamless. The nylon was so sheer Frida could see her skin through it. They must have cost a fortune, an absolute fortune. She washed them that night with the harsh lye soap they'd been issued for laundry. She was careful, gentle. She used cold water. She'd learned from her mother. Delicate things require delicate care. The stockings dissolved into a gummy, twisted mess. Frida stared at the ruined nylon in her hands and felt something break in her chest. Of course they were defective. Of course the Americans had given them garbage, something that looked nice but fell apart at first use, just like everything else in this war. pretty lies that dissolved under pressure. She found the American quartermaster the next morning. The woman was younger than Frida, blonde, with paint on her fingernails. She was eating an apple. A fresh apple. In March. "The stockings," Frida said in careful English, holding out the ruined nylon. "They are kaput, broken. I washed them, and they—" "Oh, honey," the quartermaster said, not even looking concerned. "Don't wash nylons with lye soap. Here." She walked to a storage cabinet and pulled out another pair, just reached in and grabbed them. "Take these instead." Frida didn't move. I cannot pay." "You don't gotta pay. They're free." "But I destroy the first ones. I must—" "We got pallets of these." The woman pushed the stockings into Frida's hands. "Seriously, don't worry about it." "Pallets?" The quartermaster's eyes lit up. "You want to see?" The warehouse was 3 buildings down from the main administrative office. Frida had walked past it every day and assumed it was mostly empty, maybe some basic supplies, probably half depleted. Storage was always scarce. You rationed, you conserved, you made do. The quartermaster unlocked the door and hit the lights. Floor to ceiling, wall to wall. Towers of boxes stacked in neat rows. Each box labeled, dated, categorized. Frida walked forward slowly, reading labels as she passed. Stockings, underthings, socks, toothbrushes, soap, writing, paper, combs, towels, blankets, on and on and on. One entire section was marked, "Excess Inventory. Discard, if not distributed by Deck 1945. "See?" The quartermaster gestured around proudly. "We got extras of everything. Well, almost everything. We're short on the good coffee, but that's because the boys keep stealing it." Frida stopped in front of a tower of boxes, each one marked, "Stockings, nylon, women's, size medium." She counted the boxes she could see. 20, 30, 40, and there were more rows behind, stacked deep. Thousands of pairs of stockings. Excess inventory, to be discarded. Her hand came up slowly and covered her mouth. The American was still talking, saying something about distribution schedules and requisition forms, but Frida couldn't hear her anymore. The sound of her own heartbeat was too loud. This wasn't a war they'd lost. This was a war they'd never had any chance of winning. The stockings in her hand suddenly felt obscene. A casual abundance that existed in such quantities it could be thrown away if not used fast enough. While her mother had darned and redarned a single pair until they fell apart, while Germany had rationed everything down to the thread. "You okay?" the quartermaster asked. Frida nodded. She didn't trust her voice. She walked back to the barracks still holding the stockings. She put them in her footlocker, and she didn't wear them. She couldn't. Every time she looked at them, all she could see was that warehouse stretching on forever, filled with more plenty than her entire city had seen in 5 years of war. America hadn't just beaten Germany. America had buried them in stockings. The Sunday mess hall smelled like grease and char. Kate stood in line with her aluminum tray, watching steam rise from industrial-sized griddles. The American cooks weren't careful. They flipped patties with casual violence, grease spattering the stovetop, flames licking up from the drain holes. She hadn't seen ground beef in 3 years. In Hamburg, you boiled bones for a week. You scraped marrow with a spoon, cooked potato peels until they dissolved into paste. The hospital kitchen had a chart on the wall showing how to render cooking fat from medical waste, though no one talked about what kind of waste. Every gram had a purpose. Every scrap had value. The cook slapped a burger onto her tray without looking up. White bread. Actual white bread. Soft and uniform, the kind reserved for our officers in the before times. A slice of tomato so red it looked fake, like the propaganda posters showing abundance that never existed. The meat patty was thick as her wrist, cooked all the way through. No pink, no blood, no careful rationing of protein into tissue-thin portions. She carried the tray to a table and sat. The burger was still hot enough to burn her fingers. Frida dropped into the seat across from her, eyes wide. They used the good parts. What? The meat. Frida poked the patty with her fork. This is shoulder, maybe chuck. They ground it. The parts you're supposed to roast, they... She couldn't finish. Keta bit into the burger. The beef was dry, overcooked, prepared without care or skill. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever tasted. Fat and salt and char, the white bread compressing under her teeth, the tomatoes acid cut. Her throat closed. She chewed slowly, trying not to cry in front of the Americans. At the next table, a GI scraped half his burger into the trash bin, just pushed it off his tray with a fork, the patty hitting the garbage with a wet sound. He was complaining to his buddy about the meat being like leather, man. Keitha's hands started shaking. The GI tossed his whole top bun in next. White bread, into the trash. He hadn't even torn off a piece to save, to pocket, to dry out for tomorrow. Just threw it away and lit a lucky strike. She looked down at her own tray. One burger. But the serving line was still open. The cooks were still flipping patties, the griddle still smoking. She stood up, legs unsteady, and walked back. Another? The cook didn't even blink. Just slapped another burger onto a fresh bun. She carried it back to the table. Started eating before she sat down. Slow down, Frida whispered. You'll make yourself sick. But Keta couldn't stop. Her brain was screaming that this was a mistake, an error in the supply chain, that tomorrow the meat would be gone and she'd be sorry she didn't take advantage. She finished the second burger in 4 bites and went back for a third. The cook gave it to her with the same bored expression. Like feeding enemy prisoners 3 portions of ground beef was normal. Like meat grew on trees. That night, Keta vomited into the latrine toilet until her ribs ached. Frida held her hair back, didn't say I told you so. The porcelain was clean, American-made, connected to pipes that flushed. Even the plumbing was better than anything in Hamburg. Tomorrow there will be more, Frida said quietly. Keta spat bile. I know. So why did you... Because I don't believe it yet. Sunday afternoon. The Americans had organized a baseball game. Guards versus maintenance crew, completely inexplicable. Ilona Richter sat in the bleachers because there was nothing else to do. The Louisiana sun was hot, the air thick with humidity that made her Luftwaffe-issue shirt stick to her skin. A vendor walked through the stands. Not a soldier. A civilian contractor selling refreshments to POWs, like this was a Munich beer garden and not a prison camp. He had a metal box strapped to his chest, calling out in English she barely understood. Coke? Ice-cold Coke. Frida bought one with scrip from the canteen, passed it to Ilona. The bottle was so cold it hurt to hold, condensation running down the green glass. Ilona stared at it. Us, she said. Drink it fast, Frida said, before it gets warm. Ilona tilted the bottle back. The carbonation hit her tongue like a weapon. Sharp, aggressive, sweet enough to make her teeth ache. The cold spread down her throat, the sugar rushing into her bloodstream. It tasted like electricity, like joy had been mechanized and bottled. She lowered the bottle, looked at it, read the label, Coca-Cola. Delicious and refreshing. What is this? Sugar water, Frida said. The Americans drink it constantly. On the field, a player hit the ball with a crack that echoed off the barracks. Men cheered. Someone's radio was playing swing music, horns and drums bouncing through the humid air. The whole scene felt like a dream, like someone had replaced reality with a propaganda film. Ilona took another drink. The bubbles fizzed against her soft palate. Her eyes watered from the carbonation. Who drinks this? She asked. Everyone. The guards bring cases of it. I saw a truck driver yesterday with 4 bottles in his cab. Officers? No. Enlisted, workers. The kitchen staff drinks it during shifts. Ilona did the math in her head. She'd coordinated supply lines for Luftwaffe communication stations, knew exactly how many calories per day kept a radio operator functional. Turnip coffee and black bread. Ersatz chocolate made from sawdust and food coloring. Meat once a week if you were lucky. 12-hour shifts in unheated buildings, fingers too numb to work the equipment properly. The Americans ran the same shifts drinking dessert. Sugar water, refrigerated, served in individual portions. She watched a GI on the field spit out a mouthful of Coke onto the grass. Too warm, apparently. He tossed the half-full bottle into a barrel and grabbed a fresh one from the cooler. "They refrigerate it," Ilona said. "What?" "The drinks. They have machines, ice makers, refrigeration units for beverages." She couldn't breathe properly. "We couldn't get heating fuel for the barracks in winter. People died of cold at their posts, and they're making ice cubes for—" She gestured at the baseball field, the absurdity of it. Frida didn't answer. Ilona pressed the cold bottle to her forehead. The sugar was making her dizzy, or maybe it was understanding. Germany had 13-year-olds operating anti-aircraft guns on frozen rooftops. America had refrigerated vending machines in officer clubs. "We lost the war before it started," she said. "Don't talk like that." "No. Listen." Ilona sat up straighter, the Coke bottle sweating in her grip. "I thought it was tanks, or planes, or soldiers, but it wasn't. It was this." She shook the bottle, carbonation hissing. "They can refrigerate sugar water for factory workers, transport it thousands of miles, distribute it so widely that soldiers throw half-full bottles away without thinking, and we couldn't get fresh eggs to the field hospitals." The baseball game continued. Someone hit a home run, and the Americans cheered, slapping backs, celebrating nothing important. Just a game. Just Sunday. "The logistics," Ilona whispered, "was always the horror. Logistics." She finished the Coke in 3 long swallows, the sugar crash already starting, her hands trembling around the empty bottle. On the field, the vendor was making another round, his metal box full of identical green bottles, all of them ice cold, all of them impossible. The catalog weighed more than a brick. Bertha Wolfe turned the page and saw an entire section devoted to children's toys. Tin trains, porcelain dolls, red wagons with rubber wheels, things that required metal, rubber, factory time, resources Germany had been feeding into munitions since before she'd graduated secondary school. "You want coffee?" Sergeant Dorothy Hayes stood in the doorway of the administrative office, thermos in hand. Farm-bred Nebraska stock, blonde and solid, the kind of American girl the propaganda posters had warned about. Except Dorothy wasn't corrupting anyone. She was just offering coffee. Again. "Please." Bertha's English was functional. She'd learned it studying technical manuals at Peenemünde, back when they'd actually believed the V2 would turn the tide. Dorothy poured. Real coffee. Not ersatz, not roasted grain, not the chicory mixture they'd stretched with sawdust during the last winter. Bertha had stopped questioning where it all came from. The Americans had everything. That was simply the baseline reality of the universe now. "What are you reading?" Dorothy pulled up a chair, boots scraping linoleum that was somehow cleaner than any hospital floor Bertha had seen in Germany. "This." Bertha turned the catalog around. "Sears Roebuck. You know it?" "Know it? Hell, I got half my clothes from there growing up." Dorothy flipped through pages. "See, that's the thing about the farm. Nearest proper store was 40 miles. Mail order saved our lives." Bertha stared at her. "You ordered clothing from a warehouse, and they delivered it to you." "Sure. Takes maybe 2 weeks if you're way out in the sticks." Dorothy stopped on a page showing washing machines. Her finger landed on a white enamel model with wringer rollers. "That one. Bought it for my ma last Christmas with my army pay." The catalog listed the price. Bertha did the currency conversion in her head, the same head that had calculated rocket trajectories and fuel mixture ratios. A washing machine. Industrial equipment. Delivered to a farm in Nebraska. Purchased by an enlisted woman's salary. "How much do you make?" The question came out before Bertha could stop it. Dorothy didn't flinch. $50 a month base pay. More with my NCO stripe." Bertha's hands went still on the catalog pages. Her father had been a factory foreman in Munich. Before the war, before the bombs, he'd saved for 3 years to buy a radio. A radio. This American sergeant, this girl who pronounced foreman like foreman, and thought Paris was in France but probably couldn't find it on a map, made enough in 2 months to buy her mother a machine that eliminated an entire day's labor every week. You're thinking hard about something. Dorothy's voice was careful. I worked at Peenemünde. Bertha closed the catalog. The words felt like a confession. V2, rocket program. I supervised quality control for the fuel injection system. Dorothy's face didn't change. That the thing that hit London? Yes. They sat in silence. Outside, someone was playing baseball. The crack of the bat carried through the December air. Impossible. December baseball. The Americans even controlled the weather through sheer abundance. Bert opened the catalog again. She couldn't help it. Page after page of consumer goods, bicycles, furniture, kitchen appliances, wedding rings, hunting rifles, cameras, all available for mail order, all sitting in warehouses somewhere, waiting for someone in Nebraska or Louisiana or Oregon to send in a form and a check. We designed a rocket, Bertha said quietly, that could fly 200 miles and hit a target the size of a city. The precision required, the gyroscopes, the fuel pumps, the guidance systems, we were the best in the world at it. Dorothy waited. This distribution network? Bert tapped the catalog. The logistics to make this possible. To take orders from anywhere, to warehouse this inventory, to ship it reliably, to process payments, to guarantee delivery. The precision required is higher than what we achieved with the V2. Her voice cracked on the last word. Dorothy poured more coffee. I never thought about it that way. We couldn't get fresh eggs to Berlin from a farm 50 miles away. Bertha's laugh was bitter. We ate powdered egg for 2 years. Powdered. But you can order a washing machine from Illinois and have it in Nebraska in 2 weeks. Bertha. We never had a chance. She was gripping the catalog now, knuckles white. Did we? This entire time we never had a chance. Dorothy's hand covered hers, not restraining, just present. We were so proud, Bertha whispered. Our rockets, our jets, our engineering, and you beat us with warehouses. A GI stuck his head in the door. Sarge, Major wants the supply reports before... He saw Bertha's face and backed out. I'll come back. The door clicked shut. My brother died in France, Dorothy said. Normandy. He was 19. Bertha looked up. I don't tell you that to be cruel. I tell you that so you know I got skin in this. Dorothy's voice was level. You want to know the truth? You're right. We did beat you with warehouses. We beat you because our farms grow so much food we pay people to not plant crops some years. We beat you because our factories make so many cars that mechanics can own them. We beat you because our industrial base is so big that we can refrigerate Coca-Cola for fun while we're building bombers. She slid the catalog back toward Bertha. But here's what you're missing. That's not military might. That's just... Dorothy searched for words. That's just Tuesday. That's just how we live. We didn't build all this to beat Germany. We built it because some farm girl in Nebraska deserves a washing machine. The war just proved what was already there. Bertha stared at the catalog. 1,000 pages. 1,000 pages of proof that she'd spent 6 years working for a cause that was doomed before it started. Not by soldiers, not by bravery, by supply chains, by distribution networks, by the sheer incomprehensible weight of American plenty. Can I keep this? Her voice was small. It's yours? Dorothy stood. I got 3 more in my footlocker. They send them out twice a year, free. Free. Of course they were free. The catalog itself was a luxury item in Germany, and here they gave them away to advertise other luxury items. Dorothy paused at the door. For what it's worth, that rocket program of yours, that was real engineering. Impressive stuff, even if it was pointed the wrong way. It doesn't matter now. No, Dorothy agreed. I guess it doesn't. After she left, Bertha sat alone with the catalog. Outside, the baseball game continued. Someone hit a home run, and men cheered. The sound drifted through the window along with the smell of hot dogs from the commissary. She turned to a random page. Christmas decorations, an entire section devoted to ornamental objects that served no function except beauty. Glass balls, tinsel, artificial trees for people who didn't want to cut down real ones. Berth laughed. It came out wrong. Half sob. They'd eaten sawdust bread and called it victory. And America had been throwing away half-eaten hamburgers while worrying about whether their Christmas trees were shiny enough. The packages arrived 3 days later. Red Cross shipment, local churches from Ruston and the surrounding parishes. Someone had organized a Christmas drive for the POWs. Bertha watched the boxes being unloaded from the truck, each one carefully labeled with the prisoner's name. She didn't expect anything. She wasn't even Christian. Not really. Lutheran by baptism, but lapsed by education. Science had been her religion at Peenemünde, but there was a box with her name on it. The camp commander made them wait until Christmas Eve. 200 women gathered in the mess hall, decorated with paper chains the Americans had helped them make. Someone had found a piano and was playing carols badly. The cognitive dissonance was surreal. Enemy prisoners celebrating the birth of Christ with guards who'd been shooting at their countrymen 6 months ago. "Go ahead," the commander said. "Open them." Bertha's box was light. She unwrapped it carefully, years of scarcity making her preserve even the paper. Socks, hand-knitted wool socks, a bar of ivory soap, a small Bible in German, and, at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a wooden carving of a bird. Cedar, by the smell. A robin, delicately detailed, wings spread in flight. There was a note card attached in careful handwriting. "For the German lady who likes to read, may you find peace in flight." Martha Broussard, First Baptist Church. Ruston Yurt held the carved robin up to the light. Someone had spent hours making this, carving each feather, sanding it smooth. For an enemy. For a woman who'd helped build weapons that killed Allied soldiers. Around her, other women were opening their gifts. Ketta was 2 tables over, and her box. Ketta pulled out eyeglasses. Prescription eyeglasses, not reading glasses. Custom-made lenses in wire frames. The entire hall went quiet. Ketta had been squinting for 2 years. Everyone knew it. Her glasses had broken in 1943, and there'd been no optical glass available, everything diverted to precision instruments and bomb sights. She'd been making do, holding papers at arm's length, getting headaches. Someone had noticed. Some American civilian had seen her squinting in chapel and had done something about it. Ketta stood up. She was shaking. She put the glasses on and the world must have suddenly snapped into focus, because she gasped. "Why?" Her English was broken, desperate. "Why, you are so kind." The room held its breath. An older woman in the corner stood up. She was wearing a Red Cross volunteer badge. Bert recognized her from chapel. Mrs. Broussard, the same name from Frida's hands, stopped shaking when she touched the engine. Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb had the hood up on a 1.5 in the motor pool, greased to his elbows, when she first walked past during grounds detail. She heard the problem before she saw it. The telltale valve tick that meant the rocker arm clearance was off. She paused. He looked up. "You hear that?" she asked in broken English, pointing at the engine block. He wiped his forehead with the back of his wrist. "Valve train's knocking. Gonna pull the cover this afternoon." She nodded, made a gesture with her fingers, the universal language of mechanics, indicating a quarter-turn adjustment. He grinned, surprised, and handed her a socket wrench. The forbidden friendship started there, in the language of compression ratios and timing chains. 3 weeks later, they were having full conversations. His broken technical German meeting her broken technical English, both of them gesturing with their hands when words failed. He showed her how American trucks used standardized parts, interchangeable across the entire fleet. She told him about Luftwaffe generators that required custom machining for every repair because nothing was standardized. Everything precision-made and impossible to replace. But the real shock came on a Tuesday in February, when Marcus casually mentioned his plans after discharge. "Saving up to buy a car," he said, adjusting a carburetor. Maybe a 40 Ford if I can find one clean. Frida's wrench slipped. You... By car? Yeah. He didn't look up from his work. Got about 200 saved already. Need another 2, maybe 250 for something decent. She set down her tools. Her father had been a master, electrician in Cologne. 30 years with the city power company. He'd never owned a car. They were for officials, for doctors, for the wealthy. Her family took the streetcar. Everyone took the streetcar. How much you make? She asked carefully. American sergeant? Base pay? 114 a month. Little more with my mechanic rating. She did the mental arithmetic. Even with occupation currency confusion. The numbers made no sense. A mechanic's salary could purchase personal transportation. Marcus noticed her expression. What's wrong? My father, she said slowly. Work 40 years. Never have car. Never. He stopped working. Really looked at her for the first time that afternoon. I'm sorry. I didn't think about... Not sorry. She shook her head hard. I understand now. More than before. He pulled a crumpled newspaper from his toolbox, the Ruston Daily Leader, flipped to the classifieds and pointed. See? 38 Ford sedan, good condition, $425. 39 Chevy Coupe, $375. I'll have that in 6 months, easy. The advertisements swam before her eyes. Used cars, not new, not luxury vehicles, priced within reach of an enlisted mechanic's savings. She thought of her mother's kitchen in Cologne, the ceramic jar where they saved pfennigs for coal, for bread, for survival, never for anything beyond survival. In Germany, she whispered, the mechanics will walk. Here, the mechanics will drive. Marcus folded the newspaper slowly. You're going back soon, aren't you? When they finish the repatriation processing? Yes. Maybe 1 month, maybe 2. Will you write me? After? She wanted to say yes, wanted to believe letters could cross the Atlantic, could pass through censors and occupation authorities and 1,000 reasons for mail to vanish. Wanted to believe in futures that didn't exist. I try, she said, but I think maybe letters get lost. He nodded, understood without her having to explain. Yeah. Probably. They went back to work on the truck. Neither of them mentioned it again for 3 weeks. The rec hall was empty on Thursday night. Most of the guards had Friday liberty and left early, and the POWs were in their barracks for evening count. Frida had slipped away during the head count chaos. Someone would notice eventually, but she had maybe 20 minutes. She found Marcus in the rec hall, supposedly inventorying the athletic equipment but really just sitting on a stack of tumbling mats, staring at nothing. The radio was on. Some armed forces station playing big band music, the kind that made her think of American movies from before the war, when Germany still showed American movies. They told me, she said from the doorway. Tuesday, repatriation ship from New Orleans. He stood up, didn't say anything. What was there to say? The song changed. Something slower, with strings. A woman's voice, smooth as honey, singing about a sentimental journey home. Marcus held out his hand. Dance with me. Once. Before you go. It was against every regulation. Fraternization between guards and prisoners, between white and black in Louisiana, even without the prisoner complication. Between yesterday's enemies in a war that still felt hot despite the peace. She took his hand. They moved to the center of the empty hall, under the basketball hoop and the American flag and the portrait of President Truman watching from the wall. He put his hand on her waist. Careful, respectful, the kind of distance that wouldn't scandalize even the strictest chaperone. She rested her hand on his shoulder, and they swayed to the music. Gonna take a sentimental journey, the radio sang. Gonna set my heart at ease. I'll write, he said quietly. Even if you can't write back, I'll write, for a while. Okay. Never thought my heart could be so yearny, the singer crooned. Why did I decide to roam? They danced through the whole song, neither of them speaking again, both of them knowing this was the end of something that never got to be a beginning. When the music faded and a news announcer started talking about demobilization statistics, they separated. He didn't kiss her. Too dangerous, even here, even alone. But he squeezed her hand once before he let go. "You would have made a good mechanic, in a different world." "You would have made good German," she said, then corrected herself. "No, you make good American. Better than good German." She slipped out of the rec hall before anyone noticed she was gone. Walked back to the barracks through the humid Louisiana night, past the guard towers and the wire and the neat administrative buildings with their electric typewriters and filing systems. In 4 days, she'd be on a ship heading east. Back to Cologne, or what was left of Cologne. Back to her mother's apartment if it still stood, to rubble and ration cards and reconstruction under occupation. Back to a Germany that had lost everything, including the ability to believe it had ever been great. Marcus would buy his Ford, would drive it to work, to church, to visit family in Detroit, would live in a country that gave mechanics cars and factory workers Coca-Cola, and anyone with a library card access to 1,000-page catalogs of abundance. She'd never see him again. They both knew it. But for 3 minutes in an empty recreation hall in Louisiana, they'd danced. And somehow, that mattered more than all the letters they'd never write, all the futures they'd never have. She thought about that as she climbed into her bunk, about the unbridgeable distance between their worlds, about how the war had ended, but the real defeat was just beginning, going home to a country that couldn't even dream of the ordinary miracles she'd witnessed here, about how the mechanics in America would drive, while the mechanics in Germany would walk, and how that, more than any battle or bombing raid, told you everything you needed to know about who, won, and why. The dance was over, the music was ending, time to go home. The March air hung wet and heavy over the final assembly ground. 200 women stood in formation, their American-issued cotton dresses still too clean, too new, too wrong for what waited across the Atlantic. Bertha Wolf stood at the front, hands clasped behind her back. 6 months of inventory requisitions and supply chain tracking had left her with engineer's certainty. She'd finally understood the mathematics of their defeat. The American camp commander nodded once. Permission granted. "I worked on the Vergeltungswaffe," Bertha began. Her voice carried flat across the formation. "The vengeance weapon. We called it the pinnacle of German engineering." Kata stood in the third row, her American eyeglasses catching the pale sunlight. She'd packed them carefully that morning, wrapped in tissue paper from a care package. The Hershey bars and ivory soap were already in her rucksack, gifts that would make her a queen in the rubble of Hamburg. "A rocket that could fly 200 miles, Bertha continued. "Precision guidance, supersonic speed. We were so proud." She pulled a folded requisition form from her pocket. Standard American military issue, the kind she'd processed hundreds of times in the camp office. "Last week, I traced a single order, canned peaches, from a warehouse in California to a mess hall in occupied Japan. 6,000 miles, delivered in 11 days. She held up the paper. The same system that delivers ice cream to New Guinea delivered blood plasma to Berlin, fresh eggs to North Africa, refrigerated beef to the Philippines. The women shifted. Alona stood near the back, arms crossed tight. She'd thrown away her last Coca-Cola bottle that morning, unable to face taking it home as a souvenir of impossible abundance. "We couldn't send fresh eggs 200 miles to feed Munich," Bertha said. The words landed like artillery. "Our most advanced weapons facility, Peenemünde, ran on turnip coffee in desperation. Their factory workers drank sugar water, served cold." A murmur rippled through the formation. The camp commander stood 20 feet away, face neutral. He didn't stop her. Bertha's voice hardened. "They didn't beat us with superior tanks. They didn't beat us with braver soldiers." She crumpled the requisition form. "They beat us with clerks who type 60 words per minute on electric typewriters we haven't invented yet, with supply sergeants who track inventory better than our general staff tracked divisions." Keta thought of the IBM machine, its keys flying under her fingers like magic. She'd typed the morning reports on it just yesterday, smooth and effortless. Back home, she'd returned to manual Coronas, if any still existed. "I saw the Sears catalog," Berta said. 1,000 pages. A Nebraska farm girl bought her mother an electric washing machine on Army pay. A Detroit mechanic is saving to buy an automobile. She looked across the assembled. 9 faces. Not officers, not party members. Common workers. Frida stood rigid in the second row, eyes dry. Marcus had given her a photograph 2 nights ago, taken in the motor pool. She'd burned it in the latrine that morning. Too dangerous to carry home, too painful to keep. "When you return and see the rubble," Berta's voice dropped lower, "when people ask you how we lost, tell them this. We were fighting the 19th century with 20th century weapons. They were fighting the 20th century with 21st century logistics." The silence was absolute. Even the guards had stopped moving. "This wasn't heroism," Berta said. "This was warehouses." She stepped back. The formation stood frozen. The camp commander cleared his throat. "Dismissed for final processing." No one moved immediately. The words hung in the damp Louisiana air like smoke from a gun barrel nobody wanted to acknowledge. Keta was the first to break formation. She walked to Berta, extended her hand. "Thank you." Others followed. Ilona clasped Berta's shoulder without speaking. A woman from Dresden, whose name Keta had never learned, pressed a folded note into Berta's palm. Frida stayed in formation longest, staring at the American flag hanging limp above the administration building. She thought about Marcus under a car chassis, the easy competence of American abundance, the classified ads promising $400 Fords. She thought about Cologne, where her father would be lucky to find bicycle parts. The repatriation trucks arrived at 1400 hours. The women loaded their rucksacks. Red Cross packages, care items, donated clothing, small weights of kindness that would cross the Atlantic like messages from another planet. Keta climbed into the first truck, her eyeglasses secure in their case. She'd worn them for 3 months. Back in Hamburg, they'd mark her as American touched, possibly collaborator adjacent. She'd wear them anyway. Berta loaded last, carrying only a small bag. She'd already decided. Not Germany. Argentina, maybe. Somewhere that needed engineers who understood supply chains mattered more than wonder weapons. Frida found a seat near the back. Through the canvas opening she could see the motor pool. Marcus wasn't there. His shift had ended at noon. She timed it that way. The trucks rolled toward the main gate. Women pressed against the sides for final glimpses of the camp. The mess hall where hamburgers came daily. The rec hall where radios played swing music. The warehouses stacked to the ceiling with excess inventory. The guard waved them through. Louisiana pine forests swallowed the convoy. In the third truck, someone started crying. Not loud. Just steady, quiet tears for a world they'd touched briefly and would never inhabit. Keta unwrapped a Hershey bar, broke off a square. The chocolate melted instantly in the humid heat. She'd save the rest for her mother, if she could find her mother, if Hamburg still had the street where she'd grown up. The trucks drove toward New Orleans. From there, transport ships to Bremerhaven. From there, trains to wherever home used to be. Bertha stared at the catalog page she'd torn out months ago. Page 47. The Kenmore washing machine. She'd memorized the specifications, the price, the delivery terms. Evidence that abundance wasn't a trick or propaganda, just American normal. The convoy passed a Coca-Cola billboard. Ilona looked away. They rode in silence through the afternoon, 200 women carrying the weight of understanding. Not bitterness, exactly, not even defeat in the traditional sense, just the cold mathematics of it, the typewriters and the warehouses, the logistics that ended empires while factory workers drank cold sugar water and complained the burgers were too dry. The truth they'd carry home like shrapnel: Germany never had a chance. Not because of courage or tactics or even strategic mistakes, Because you can't beat a nation that uses electric typewriters to write cafeteria menus while you're still breaking fingers on manual Coronas to log the dying. The trucks rolled on. Behind them, Camp Ruston faded into Louisiana haze. The administrative building, the mess halls, the warehouses full of things America made so fast they marked them for disposal rather than run out of storage space. Ahead, the Atlantic. And beyond that, rubble. And somewhere in that rubble someone would ask them, "How did we lose?" And they'd remember Bertha's speech, the crumpled requisition form, the simple arithmetic of industrial might. They'd remember the hamburgers, they'd remember the typewriters, and they'd try to explain what warehouse really meant when you'd seen it from inside.